Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Taylor, and today I'm going to be finishing this Mini Cooper project. Or at least I hope I'll be finishing it. I have the transmission out, I'll be replacing the clutch, the rear main seal, as well as doing the axle shafts, and then hopefully I can get on to doing some work to the supercharger as well. In my last video, you can see I pulled off all of this stuff, and I found that the axle shafts had ripped CV boots, which explains why everything is such a grimy, disgusting mess. The transmission is right here. I'm going to be cleaning that up. I have brake cleaner to basically hose all of this stuff down, and then I will be cleaning up most of the gritty, grimy grease that you see here and reassembling everything. So as you can see here, I just removed the pressure plate from the flywheel, and this clutch disc is absolutely shocking. This thing is just smoked. This is the backing material from the friction material, and as you can see, it is completely gone. I don't think I've ever seen a clutch worn this badly. This thing is completely shot, and additionally, since that the rivets were down to past the rivets, it was wearing on the pressure plate and just completely scored the whole surface here. So this no doubt was the problem with this Mini Cooper. I got the rear main seal out, and I just shot some brake cleaner all around here just to clean up all the remnants of that burnt up clutch. And this surface looks really good in here to let this to lay that new rear main in. So and everything is pretty smooth. Nothing's too worn out. This is the old rear main seal. It actually looked to be good. It wasn't leaking, at least that I could tell. But you know, while you're in here, it's a good idea to change that. Here's the rear main seal. It's in there sitting flush. Make sure to put a little bit of grease around the inside and outside edges of it so it slips on easier. And then I actually use the back of this wooden hammer and tapped it with this other hammer just so that I wouldn't damage the surface of the new rear main seal. Make sure you use either a rubber mallet or some form of a piece of wood. Here's my new flywheel. This is the competition clutch single mass flywheel, and they did provide ARP flywheel bolts. And I used red Loctite on those and torqued them to 70 foot-pounds. The reason that I used red Loctite was because we're going from a dual mass to a single mass flywheel, and there will likely be a little bit more vibration given that there's less dampening on the back of the crankshaft, and I wanted to really make sure that those bolts would not rattle loose, so the red Loctite at 70 foot-pounds is what I chose. I read somewhere that 66 foot-pounds was the torque spec, so I went just a little bit above, just because I felt like it. So the old clutch, here's the pressure plate again, actual clutch disc, which is roasted, and this is the dual mass flywheel, and this thing weighs a ton. I can't even pick it up from right here. It, I believe, is like 27 pounds. So this new one that I'm installing is 13.8. So I can only imagine how helpful that's going to be for a small displacement motor like this to get rid of all that rotational mass. I just cleaned out the bell housing as best I could with some brake cleaner there, and it's pretty clean. I got all of the major heavy particles out, so it's good and clean. And then I did put the new throwout bearing in, grease the input shaft and the clutch fork. The next thing to do is to actually install the clutch disc and the pressure plate onto the flywheel, and then I can get this transmission mounted up. All right, the clutch and pressure plate are in. I have it all centered up with the centering tool, and I've got every bolt around it tightened along with red Loctite. So hopefully this is the last time I ever see this thing. Now, I mentioned before that I was going to be degreasing a lot of stuff, and after cleaning that bell housing, I realized it was so filthy, I don't even want to do it at my house. So when the car's put back together, I'll drive it to a car wash somewhere and just pressure wash the hell out of it. There's just a whole lot of buildup on all of this stuff, and I don't want to clean the cement at my house for as long as I've been working on this car. Well guys, that was terrible, but I just got the transmission in. There it is. I've got the upper mount all bolted up and tightened. Most of the bell housing bolts are in, and I just got to go around and hook up all the little extra wires. I got the sleeve cylinder down there done. So now it's just time to bolt everything back up, get all these wires, wire looms in their original locations, get underneath, put the starter back in, dust covers, just a whole bunch of little stuff. So I'll check in with you after I get all of that done. One thing I definitely need to do is check the pedal feel before I get any further. Just want to make sure that it works. And yeah, it feels like a clutch. All right, underneath the car you can see I have the reverse light plugged back into the transmission. The shifter linkages are hooked up. I have both heat shields back on. The O2 sensor wires are tucked out of the way. Starter's in, and the bell housing is all snugged up. The motor is freestanding again. I don't have a jack stand underneath, and we're ready for the next step. Well, I just realized I don't have a socket big enough to remove the axles from the hubs. There's a really big nut on there, and I just don't have one that size in my toolkit. So one quick run to the parts store, and I'll be right back with you guys. I'm back from the parts store. I got the first axle out of the car, and I'll show you the comparison between the new and old. So here is the old axle. You can see it's completely torn apart. And then this is my remanufactured axle from Napa Auto Parts. These were like $78 a side, and then a $40 core charge, so I will be able to get some money back on those. And I do have a surprise upgrade that I didn't mention before. While I have all this apart, I've decided to put brand new brakes on the car as well. So this is a drilled and slotted rotor. I have all four front and rears with pads, and then the pad sensors. So this thing is going to be pretty well put together by the time this is all done. I'm going to get started on these axles and brakes, and I'll check in with you when I'm done. Well, I've had a little bit of trouble getting the axle off of the passenger side, but I finished the driver's side. You can see it's all mated up with the transmission. Got the new nut on the outside, torqued basically as tight as I possibly can with the tools I have, so it should be good. Since I've been struggling with that other side, I moved on to the supercharger, and I have the pulley removed, and you really should buy the proper tooling to take this apart. I used one of these clamp style pullers from O'Reilly, and it destroyed the original pulley, as you can see. I won't be using it again anyways, but it'll just make your life easier with that proper tool. All right, I got the supercharger buttoned up. I put this AC Delco Supercharger Oil in there. I put about 3/4 of it in the front, and then about 1/4 of the bottle in the back. There's some gears back there for the water pump. This is my new water pump I installed, and then of course the Craven Speed 15% pulley. So I'm gonna get this on the car now. All right, the supercharger's on. I put my brand new Gates belt on. It's a shorter length because I did go with a smaller pulley. Dipstick tube, intake, throttle body, intercooler, everything is back on now. I'm waiting to get the proper tools to remove this axle shaft because I cannot get this nut off of there to save my life. Extremely tight. So next thing I'm working on is the plugs. I decided to go with NGK Laser Platinum Premium plugs. These were listed for like a John Cooper Works. They're a step colder, like I said before, because we are running more boost now. And if you have a look at the old, I have the first plug out, the old plug is extremely burnt up, very fouled, and I believe it's actually the original plug. It has the BMW logo on it. And this thing, I'm sure, has seen all of the 150,000 miles that this car has. So I can only imagine how much better performance will be once I get the new plugs in. Well, with the help of my trusty friend, the propane torch, I was able to get this axle shaft off the passenger side. The bolt was extremely tight, and I actually destroyed most of it getting it off. Just sheared the threads right out of it, but here you go. Here is the brand new axle shaft, obviously, and then the used shaft out of the car. This was the end that was stuck, very, very seized into the hub assembly. Got that out. The next thing to do is get this carrier off of here. There's a little carrier bearing that goes on the axle shaft. I just have to get that housing off. There's a C-clip inside. Slide it onto the new one and get it put in the car. All right, we got new brake rotors and pads on here. Finally got the axle in on the passenger side. The carrier is hooked up, and I have brand new Redline MTL transmission fluid in there. Let's get this cross member in. Well, of course, the GoPro battery died while I was shooting that last clip, but I kept plugging away to get this thing put together. So I'll show you guys a couple of the things I got done off camera. As you can see, this thing is almost looking like a car again. I've got the front bumper back on, radiators all plumbed, hooked up. I have the fan wires hooked up. All of the lights in the bumper cover are hooked up. The only things that are left to put the air box back in, which shares the same container as the PCM. I'll put the cold air intake back in and get these wheels on here, and we may be taking it for its first ride this evening. PCM and intake are back on, and don't worry, I am going to clean these up, and then I will either clean or change that filter depending on how bad it is. But this is just put together now so I can get the car started. Wheel 1, check. Wheel 2, check. Almost forgot, I need to top off the coolant, and I probably should put some power steering in because that did leak out while it was on the ground. But I have coolant here now, so we'll try to get that started. Well, here's the moment of truth. I'm gonna jump in the car, and hopefully I'm half as good of a mechanic as I think I am, and this thing goes into gear with no issues. All right. I think the clutch is engaging. Oh, ho, ho, ho. We got lift off. All right, we're driving the car, and it actually is actually pretty impressive. It gets up and goes pretty good, and the clutch works extremely well. It is a little chattery, which I kind of expected because we took a lot of weight out of that flywheel. But overall, it does everything it's supposed to. It is currently stuck in major lowrider position, so there's still a lot of work to be done to this car, but we're making good progress. Well guys, that is going to conclude today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed it because this was a monumental effort. I went through several pairs of clothes, had grease from head to toe, and I think I even threw out my back trying to put that transmission in there, but it is all worth it because this Mini Cooper now runs and drives and is sitting back on the ground. I don't want to mislead you. This video actually took course over several different days. I had to wait for parts, I had to go and do normal work, so that is why it took so long to get this video out. But here the car is up and running, and I'm excited for updates in the future because this car definitely is not done. It needs a lot more work. For starters, the wheels are still mismatched, definitely needs a good detail, and there is a slight sporadic idle. There is a check engine light on too, so there's a few more mechanical things that I'll need to tackle, but it's getting there. As always guys, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a big thumbs up for me and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more automotive content like this. There is going to be a whole lot more of the Mini Cooper, the El Camino, the Hellcat, and my Ford F450 that you don't see. But for today, that is all, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next video.